What's up, my plantiest plant people? It's Tuesday, the 18th of August in the year of 2020. Yes, that's right, the one that is trying to destroy us all. And we're back with another episode of the Planthropology Podcast, the show where we dive into the lives, careers, and ambitions and passions of some really cool plant and nature people and let you know what keeps them coming back for more. Y'all, we might as well slap 4 doors and a hatchback on today's episode because it's a crossover. Do you get it? Because doors and they have a hatchback, and I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. Anyway, more on that soon. A little bit of housekeeping first. First thing, I would like to once again solicit your reviews. If you could leave me a rating and review either on Podchaser or Apple Podcasts or Castbox or anywhere else that you can leave reviews, I would appreciate it. I just want to make sure that we are still heading in the right direction with the show, that everything is going like you want to hear and like you want it to be. And also it helps keep us up in the ratings and let more people discover the show and also learn that they are really cool plant people and that they also can nerd out about this stuff. Second, join us in the Planthropology's Cool Plant People Facebook group. It's like all the fun. It's so much fun. You need to be a part of it. There's questions, there's answers, there's like so many memes about plants, so many memes. And I know you're going to love every minute of it. There are some really cool plant people in the Planthropology's Cool Plant People Facebook group. Next, our Podners. Podner is podcast partner. I'm batting 1,000 this morning, y'all. First, Pecan Ridge at pecanridge.com. If you need pecans, if you need barbecue sauce, if you like pie or pillows with grid work streets that represent Lubbock, America on them, or all kinds of other fun gifts and locally made goodies, hit up pecanridge.com. Whether you live in the Lubbock area or not, they have something that you will love. Use the promo code PLANTPeople, all lowercase, all one word at checkout, and you'll get 10% off your order, and everyone will be happy, and there will be cheering in the streets. Second, check out local LBK, especially if you're in the Lubbock area or if you end up in the Lubbock area from time to time. Local LBK works with local businesses from movie theaters and clothing stores to restaurants and coffee shops to provide you the best deals. And for the price of $5 per month, the cost of 1 cup of coffee at Green Mermaid store, you can be a member of local LBK. 10% of every order, actually more than that, I don't remember the percentage. More than 10% of every order goes back into local community building and goes back into business development. And you'll get a discount card that gives you cool discounts at all these places, and you will really plug into and support our community. The link for that is in the show notes. Okay. Now that all that's out of the way, did you have fun? I had fun. Next, we're going to talk about today's episode. And I mentioned it was a crossover. And today's crossover is with Devon Bowker from the Wildlife Podcast. And Devon and I spoke. We've become friends over the past few months on Twitter. And y'all, and if I haven't said this before, follow all these podcasts on Twitter. Podcast Twitter is lit. You can argue about worms. You can find all kinds of cool facts. There's jokes galore. You'll love it. Plug into podcast Twitter. But Devon and I have been friends a few months on social media, and we really kind of hit it off. Their show, The Wildlife, is great. It is so relevant to so many things going on in society today. But more than anything, they just talk about how cool nature is, from plants to animals and everything in between. Devon's show, The Wildlife, is just amazing, and they do a really thoughtful and thorough job of covering all those things. So I asked him if he would come be on the show and talk about some nonprofit work he's doing, talking about the show and his life as a high school science teacher in the year 2020. Just dwell on that for a sec. Are you done? Have you dwelled enough? Okay, great. So Devon came on. It's a really fun interview. We laugh a lot. We talk about everything from our 4-year-old boys, and we both have a 4-year-old boy, and what it's like to try to limit screen time, to just the bigger questions of access to nature and access to education and all of the stuff wrapped up in that. It's a wonderful episode. It's a ton of fun, and I know you're going to love it. So tie up your shoes, put on your longest tube socks, and enjoy another wonderful, super fun episode of the Planthropology Podcast with Devon Bowker from The Wildlife. All right, well, we are up and running, and I'm here with Devon Bowker from The Wildlife Podcast. How's it going today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm hanging in there, dealing with life as it comes through this whole ordeal.
Yes, as best as any of us can. I mean, that's really what it's all about at this point.
Yeah.
Just managing, going with the flow.
Yeah, and it's like it changes a couple of times a day, or and so you just have to deal with it.
Yep. But I've gotten to the point where largely, I still stay really up to date on everything, but in terms of like my job and things, I'm just kind of like, you know what, just tell me what the plan is, and if it changes, tell me what that plan is, and I'll just approach it with a positive attitude and go with the flow, because that's about all you can do at this point.
Oh yeah, you just do your best. What if we'll get into the actual content here in a minute, but what have you and your family spent quarantine and lockdown times doing?
Oh my gosh, it's kind of funny because in a way, I don't feel like a whole lot has changed because that's just kind of how we live. I mean, we do a lot of hiking, we do a lot of stuff outside, and that's not really all that restricted. So we're still doing a lot of hiking and still doing a lot of stuff outside. If anything, I think, we've just done a lot more family, meaningful time kind of stuff. We go on a walk every night for a couple miles, and getting more chances to do fun stuff like a buried a treasure chest out in the yard for my son to go find later.
Oh, that's cool.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, lots of, as a parent, I'm sure you can relate, hopefully, far too much screen time.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, so we had a friend that posted something on Facebook a while back and was like, so how are you limiting screen time? And I'm like, I'm not. I just, we hope for the best and hope his brain is not too mushy when we get on the other side of all this.
Yeah, I don't want to say gave up a while ago, but it just got to a point where it's like, I can't even keep track anymore. It's all right. We're okay.
we are dealing with this as it comes. Yeah, we at least try to keep the stuff that he watches. Like, he has a little Kindle Fire that he watches shows on, and we try to make sure it's more like PBS and nature and educational. Yeah. But lately he has gotten into, so he's 4 and he doesn't play video games, but he found some video game playthroughs. And so he just watches Mario, walk through.
I'm laughing about this because this is the exact same situation I'm finding myself in with a 4-year-old. Because we were doing a lot of ABC Mouse and stuff that was, more on the educational side. And, we have a Fire Stick, and you can go on YouTube and search and stuff. And he stumbled upon, I don't even know how, but he ended up pulling up Yoshi Craft World. And he doesn't really play games, and so he's just been obsessively watching Luigi's Mansion, and Mario, to the point where we actually ended up just buying a Switch. It's on the way, so we can just introduce him to that, because it's driving us crazy just watching the walkthroughs.
Oh my gosh!
And it's you can't even read the dialogue boxes.
And so,
what are you getting from this?
Oh, and that's the funniest thing, because we're like, oh, so you're watching your video about the game, and he just thinks they're movies, right? He just thinks they're, but he talks in video game now. He's we'll be doing something, and he's like, oh, we unlocked another level. We're like, what are you even talking about? What does that mean?
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so I know I'm not alone in this.
Oh no, absolutely not. We're, I think as parents, it's we try to be as educational and stuff, and at some point it's just okay, you know what, have fun and give me 5 minutes to not be talked to. I just need 5 minutes.
Yeah.
No, but it has been an adventure for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I guess let's jump into you and your life, and you host this great podcast called The Wildlife, where
Thank you.
y'all talk about everything from trees and plants to all kinds of animals and worms that make Twitter angry and all kinds of stuff. So tell me about your life first. Like what did you study? Where did you grow up? What got you into nature and science?
Yeah, sure. It's kind of one of those things where yeah, I to use a more southern term, if it was a snake, it would have bit me.
Right.
It took me a really long time to realize that like this was really the thing that I wanted to do. And when I look back, it's just like, how did I not realize? Because, as a kid, I remember, so I was born in Ohio. My family moved to Texas. There was a period where we moved to Minnesota and then to Kentucky and then back down to Texas. We were kind of all over the place. But I remember like as a kid in Pasadena, in my front yard, I had a neighbor friend across the street and he would come over and we would be pretending Steve Irwin.
Right.
Or like the Krat brothers.
Right.
And we'd just be eating plants in my yard. Just to, like, to see like, what they taste like and if we could survive on them. Fortunately, we never got crazy sick or anything, which is just astonishes me. But like that was just how we had fun. And my mom recently they were moving and she sent me this giant bin because she saves everything. I keep calling her a hoarder. But she's at least getting rid of it, I guess. And like I found this thing from like kindergarten where what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a scientist explorer because they discover animals and stuff. But yet at some point, I wanted to be a pilot. And then I actually got really into culinary. Won best teen chef in Houston.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was in the competition for the Art Institute, and then I kind of was just like, I don't actually want to do this, and I dropped out.
Wow.
It was a whole thing, and then started college for history education, and then realized, oh, you know what? Actually, I really love the science part, so I went into science education. Then, like the usual college student in their early phases, I ended up switching to biotech, then biomed, and then finally the really long major that I ended up sticking with was ecology field biology with an emphasis in wildlife biology.
Okay.
Growing up my family was very outdoors. We did a lot of camping. Some of my earliest memories are me 3-4 years old, up in front of my family doing the hiking and picking up frogs and that kind of stuff. Always just really curious. Doing things like putting a grasshopper in a jar with some ants to see what would happen,
right.
Which is kind of sadistic, but and as far as I went through a wildlife biology program, and during that I did a lot of different stuff. I worked for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as a park ranger. I worked. I took a semester where I actually went back down to Texas and worked at Armand Bayou Nature Center as an outdoor educator. And that experience was really what kind of set things on a new course for me, although I didn't realize it at the time. Because I was down there to intern at the Wildlife Center of Texas. And I was working like 2 or 3 other jobs at the time. And I was looking for something more field related. And so I went to Armand Bayou and I literally was like, what do you have? Do you have anything, working in, with seed gathering? What can I do? And they're like, we don't really have anything open there, but we do have something in outdoor education. Would you be interested in that? And I was like, I mean, I guess. And then I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And then, college went on. My wife and I had a little boy, graduated, got a job with the Minnesota DNR as an interpretive naturalist, and was just absolutely immersed in the whole thing. But I was still looking for things that, I felt like was the expectation, something more in the field, something that wasn't like an educational position, but something doing research or conservation.
Sure.
And I ended up doing wolf conservation work for like 2.5 years, which was incredibly interesting. It was for a nonprofit. And there was a lot in working with different federal and state governmental things and doing stuff with law and trying to get, localized programs set up. And it was a lot of things and it taught me a lot. It's very interesting. And it's something that I would never change for anything. But in terms of, at some point towards the tail end there, I started going back to school to be a science teacher. Realized, really that education piece is the part that I was most passionate about. Even in the wolf stuff, it was the times that I got to teach, the times that I got to go out and hold an educational meeting or something. That was the times where I really felt, like I had a fire inside.
Yeah.
And the wildlife was kind of something in the background of all of this. So 2017, it was right after I graduated from college. I didn't have a job yet. I was waiting for my summer position to start. And I was home with my son, who was very little, and it's not like he talked or anything.
Right.
Yeah. And I was looking kind of for something to do. And I was like, I'm going to start a blog. So I started the wildlife.blog, started answering people's questions and just posting some interesting stuff. Then I got the idea of like, well, what if I did like a video series? And I called up Dr. Tim Caro at UC Davis because I saw an article about his research on why zebras have stripes, and ended up doing an interview with him. And I was trying to put it together, but the video file got corrupted. And so there was no video that was going to happen.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? So I put it together in audio and I just uploaded that and was like, well, maybe this will work. And I started getting some feedback from friends and stuff that was like, that's actually pretty cool. And are you going to do anything with that? And it took a few months and eventually convincing my brother to join in. And it's just kind of exploded from there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really enjoy y'all's show. I like the tone of it. I feel like it's very, you do a great job of kind of treading this line of it being conversational, but also like really, like there's really a lot of content, like a lot of science and a lot of like stuff that you cover. And I've said for a long time that you have to like, and I know how this sounds, but you almost have to trick people into learning, right? You have to get them laughing and you have to get them having fun first. And then you can slip in education, right? And just kind of to hide it in there.
Yeah. See, and that's definitely something I learned starting with outdoor education. And I was able to bring into, because I was like the ecology club president and stuff in college, and we did educational programs and things. But as a naturalist, one of the things that's drilled into you constantly while you're trying to plan for your programs and things is your audience is not captive. It's not like a classroom where they have to be sitting there. They can walk away whenever they want to.
Right.
And so everything you do has to be about, probing and finding connections and finding ways to keep people there, keep people listening, keep people engaged, relate it to their life. And, that's kind of the approach I've just taken to teaching, and it's the approach that I try to take to a podcast, although it's difficult because with a podcast, you can't probe.
Right.
That part's not there. You just have to try to do your best.
But I think, over time, you do kind of start to learn your audience and you start to learn what works with people and what doesn't. And you can kind of drive the show that way. And I think y'all have done a great job with that. So I guess the question I was going to ask, and we'll kind of come back to the show a little bit here in a minute, but I want to talk about your life as a high school teacher, high school science teacher. And so two questions there. The first, I guess, is like, how has and you kind of mentioned this just now, actually, how has your life as a kind of informal educator, which, I have a similar background to you there coming from Extension, or community educator, how has that like informed and molded the way you teach in the classroom?
Yeah. It kind of like I was saying in terms of realizing, so when you're dealing with high school students, you're dealing with a very odd demographic. I love them to pieces, but they're weird. But part of what I mean by them being weird is they're in such an in-between, because like they to themselves are grown enough that they have a perspective and they have a world lens and they have dreams beyond school.
Right.
And they have things that they find that are far more important than school. And, they're starting to get to the point where they're like, okay, high school is a waste of time. I'm done with this. Why can't I just move on? And kind of checking out. But they're also kids.
Yeah.
They're not adults yet. And so a lot of the things about being a kid still apply. And so it's just about figuring out, the same that you would do with a naturalist program, except the great thing is you get to keep doing it. It's not just for 20 minutes. It's every single day, building relationships, figuring out what makes people tick, what motivates them, what they care about outside of school. And that's really the biggest thing is everything that I teach, I'm trying to take, something that's in the news, some kind of current event or some kind of external connection and bring it into what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's about just bringing in a larger concept. Like I love using the Wood Wide Web to introduce ecosystems and the interconnectivity of life and stuff, or, introducing evolution. The way that I've always done that is I borrow a Archaeopteryx fossil from the museum, replica, not the actual fossil.
Sure.
And simulating a dig. And so then it's this whole process of uncovering this thing and they don't know what it is. And I have them try to characterize it as either a bird or a reptile, and they can't. It's two in between.
Right.
Which brings in this idea of transitional species, and it kicks off the whole unit. Blood type and cell stuff. I do a crime scene lab. It's all
that's awesome.
Applicable to the real world in some capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you teach biology, I guess?
Yeah, so I teach, I actually teach biology, physics, physical science, and geometry, which is kind of out of left field. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot, man.
Yeah. And so physics is, same kind of approach. And what's funny is last year was my first year teaching physics, and I started in the very traditional sense, and I realized really quick, like, that was not going to work. And so one day when they came into class, I was like, we're going outside. We're going to move my car. And they're like, what? So I tied a rope around a tree, tied it to the back end of my car. And I was like, all right, move it. And they experimented pulling the rope in different ways and realized it wasn't budging. And they did a lateral push, kind of like you would on a bow. And my car moved. And they were like, what? How is this working? and so very quickly started incorporating a lot of that kind of stuff. I mean, we did a whole final project on forces in motion and all that stuff by their project was being a team for NASA and designing a way to intercept or divert an asteroid from colliding with the Earth. And so we looked into the dinosaur extinction and, how you would divert something in space and like all kinds of just really outlandish stuff. And they ended up designing 3 solutions to if an asteroid was incoming, how we could prevent, an apocalypse.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
Super cool. And I like that, I think education's such an interesting thing where our students today, and I teach college students, but I teach a lot of freshmen. And so ultimately they're not that different than your high school students, right?
No,
they're coming in, they're 18, but they're still kids. Which is fine. I think that's good. I think that's where we need to be teaching. But like they can, on their cell phones, really access all human knowledge, right? Like we have at our fingertips the collection of millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of science and literature and everything. But what they can't learn from their cell phones is how to apply that to their lives.
Yeah.
And I think as educators, that's where we stand in the gap today as a modern educator. And so I love the thought of you taking these concepts and taking them outside and showing them nature and showing them like, oh, this is what affects this plant growing, or this is what affects the way that this animal feeds, or let's push my car, whatever. Like, I think that's such a cool way to help them make those like long-term connections between information and application.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say too, I mean, kind of relating to our current time and COVID and stuff.
Yeah.
Before schools ended up closing out, back in March. I'm in the same boat. I'm losing track of time.
It just all runs
honestly.
together.
Everything's crazy. But, thinking back to then, it was when things were really heating up and we didn't really know what was going to happen. Things were changing, by the second. And things are doing that now. But at that time, it was like you didn't know what was going to happen in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you were just kind of watching as like cases creeped closer and closer and closer and things like that. And I made the decision, I talked to my principal and stuff, and I made the decision. I said, this is a really big deal. And I know that it's all that's on their minds. Right now, we're doing something on ecology and biology, and we're doing something with electricity and physics. I don't feel like it's right. Can I put a pause on this for a week and figure out how to approach COVID and getting them prepared for how to handle this in the real world, especially if we end up outside of school, because they won't have us as constant support. And I remembered, so my wife is an English teacher, and earlier in the year, she had a short story unit and she had done War of the Worlds.
Okay.
And we had this conversation about, how applicable it is to a lot of things. And in her context, she had used it kind of as like a media and government and who you could trust kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in my context, I was like, there's a few things with this, because the premise of the story is a virus. It's an invader, or there's an invader, and then there's a virus that ends up wiping out the invader. There's this where you can't trust the media, and the information is changing, and people are dying, and all these weird components. And plus, there's these real world components where, there's the story about back in the day it causing panic in the streets when it played on the radio. There's a story of when it played on a South American radio station and it actually caused deaths of people and a raiding of a town and the military, like really complicated stuff. And so I brought that in and actually started teaching a collaborative lesson on War of the Worlds and truth and panic and how to balance between panic and calmness and accepting reality and stuff, and started to bring in lessons about like, here's a virus. This is how it spreads. This is what it does. Here's what the current numbers are saying. And, by the end of it, just a week, they were more educated than 90% of people that I was seeing on social media, and just ready to go, ready to handle it, ready to, figure out the numbers, figure out what was going on, going home and communicating it to families and stuff. It was amazing.
Yeah. Man, that's such a big task of, especially right now, of making sure that your students are well equipped to handle life. Because I think ultimately that's what we do as educators, is try to give our kids and our students the tools they need to make it through life. And whether that is through, knowledge about how ballistic motion works in your physics classes, to how to parse out all this information we hear on the internet about COVID and differentiate between information and misinformation. That is a big and important task.
Yeah, in a way, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah,
especially as a high school, because it is very much even society. They're kind of like, well, high schoolers can take care of themselves, and it's like, but they are still kids. And like they're just really good at masking and acting big and tough and acting like they're an adult, but they're kids. And when you really think about that, the people you have in front of you are somebody's kid, and while they might look big and tough, inside they're not so much. And you really understand the impact and the seriousness of like making sure that they're ready. Like ready to actually go out there and handle stuff. Yeah,
for sure. Oh, for sure. And it is a lot of pressure, but I think it's important work that needs to be done, and it takes a special kind of person to do it, for sure. So I guess let's kind of transition back into the wildlife and the show itself, and then also some of the things that have spun off from that. I know you have just started this nonprofit, that you've got a variety of other kind of efforts going through it. So, how many episodes in are you into your show? 50 something, 60 something?
Yeah, 60 something. It's kind of hard to say because where we've sometimes re-released different things, but we've added some things to re-release it. So I think
Right.
technically probably around like 65 or so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh, that's a lot because I do my
Yeah.
show. I haven't really been very good at sticking to a schedule. This comes out generally like every other week, but then I keep like throwing in extra stuff. And during lockdown, I released it every week just to have some extra content out there.
Yeah.
But okay, so I've got a question, and this is an aside a little bit. How did this Ryan Reynolds thing start? Because you always talk about like we are this many episodes in without having Ryan Reynolds come on to discuss Wolverines.
Yeah. Yeah. That started with my students.
Okay.
There was one morning, it was before school, and some of my students were in my classroom early and, catching up about the weekend and stuff. And they were asking about the show because a lot of them listened to it. And one of them said something like, you really got to get like a big celebrity on there. I'm like, well, we focus on scientists really and stuff.
Right.
And there's celebrity scientists, but they're like, no, you need a celebrity because that'll really draw in attention. And I was like, well, who? And they're like, Ryan Reynolds. I'm like, why Ryan Reynolds? I'm like, because he plays Deadpool. And I'm like, but how? I have to figure out a way to connect that somehow. And they're like, well, I don't know. I mean, what other movies has he been in? And we just started going in a weird circle. And it was like, well, he always jokes about Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman played Wolverine. Wolverines are real animals. And my students were like, please, for us, every week, will you start asking this? And I was like, you know what? I mean, if I don't, you're going to bug me about it incessantly. So sure. Yeah. Why not? And it's kind of funny. So let's just go for it and see if it ever happens.
Dude, I love that so much. That like is the first time I heard it when I first, because I think I jumped into your show. I don't remember how far you were pretty far into. Actually, you know what? I do remember. It was the episode that you had with Ellen from Just the Zoo of Us, because I'd listened to her show and I'd seen that she posted it, and that's kind of how I got connected with what y'all are doing. And I went back and started listening to some of the back catalog, and I was like, how did this? I mean, but I love it. And now it's like somewhere in the back of my head, I'm like, how do I help them get Ryan Reynolds on the show? And like, I'll tag him on Twitter as much as I can, but
yeah,
that would be the coolest thing ever, by the way.
Yeah. I've had some people say, well, why not Hugh Jackman then? And I'm like, well, because he's not Ryan Reynolds and that's not what my students asked for.
Right.
So sorry, Hugh, if you're interested, great and all, but like, we're looking for Ryan.
Although, you know what? But he may be like a gateway celebrity, right? Not that. I mean, Hugh Jackman's one of the biggest celebrities in the world, but they compete constantly. So if you can get Hugh Jackman on the show and have him talk crap about Ryan Reynolds, I bet you could get Ryan Reynolds on there as a rebuttal. So this plan's coming together. We'll get there. That's hilarious, dude. Okay, so as you're I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question, right? Okay, as you're kind of building your show, what process do you use to pick topics and figure out what you're going to talk about?
Oh gosh, so really early on, and if there's anything in the world that gives me just the most cringing reaction, it's going back and listening to our older episodes.
Oh man,
because oh my god, and I feel like we've come a really long way. I feel like we still have a long way that we could go. But back in the day, it was like literally I'd be on the phone. This is kind of how it started in the idea of having my brother on. And I'm going to say Ricky. He goes by Richard professionally, but I've always called him Ricky.
He's your brother, right?
Really, every single time I say Richard on the show, I have to like think about it ahead of time. It's really hard for me to do. We always have these really long phone conversations where like I'm telling him about something I learned in college or whatever, and he's asking all these questions, and that was when I was like, you know what? Why don't you just do this with me? We could just do this and record it. And that's how we could do it. And that's what we started with doing, as I was like, hey, Richard, have you ever heard of the Christmas Island crabs? And he's like, no, I haven't. And we just started talking about them. And then it got to a point where like, so we'd finish one and then I'd be like, all right, what do you want to talk about next time? And then that's how we did it. Very disorganized. We didn't even have a release schedule.
Right.
It was just kind of whenever we felt like it. Then when we were like, let's start getting more regular with this, we have a Google spreadsheet that has, based on a weekly schedule, 3 years worth of topics and concepts and questions
Wow.
that we want to do episodes on. And one of the things we always joke about is like there's 8.7 million species identified. If you were to, 1 week each, I mean, it would take like 67,000 years to really actually do that. So we're never going to run out of topics. So it's kind of like we have this really long list, and we look maybe at the calendar on if there's some kind of loop in, but really we just wait for the right person.
Sure.
So, looking through social media, a news article hits, we read a book and find somebody interesting. Social media is super, super helpful, especially Twitter now that we've been getting more into that. But really it's kind of like, sometimes it's a question. Sometimes it's a question my students had. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's something that my son said, and I was like, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But it always, it's just kind of what we feel like, is just opportune at the moment, I guess. And the way that it usually ends up working is that we find a person, and then we go creeper mode and just comb through their stuff.
Yeah.
Publication history, their website, their Wikipedia, anytime they've been in an article, and just find out everything we can about what they've worked on, their perspective, how they interview and that kind of thing. Send off an email and say, hey, you want to be on the show?
Yeah.
And hopefully they reply, and usually yes. And actually, we haven't had anybody say no.
That's cool.
Which has been great in 3 years of doing this. And, we then once we've had the go ahead and we've set a date, we try to hone in on, so as a teacher, I'm really big on a lesson is guided by an essential question.
Okay.
So it's the question that you're hoping that they can answer by the end of the lesson. And usually in terms of high school, you're saying like, okay, there's 3 main concepts that you can cover before you lose them. So 3 main concepts in approaching that essential question. So what we do with every episode is we go, here's our essential question, whether or not we say it on the show. And here are the 3 main things that we really want to truly deeply cover.
Right.
And we have a Google slide template where we start putting in pictures, videos, interesting links, and that kind of thing. Develop a list of questions in a general outline and send that out to the person we're going to talk to. We talk to them. Then we literally sit next to each other, where I'm sitting right now, and we listen to the interview, and we type notes into that Google slide and go through the whole thing. And maybe record some commentary as we're sitting there thinking about it and having ideas and questions.
Sure.
And then we go back and kind of storyboard it. So we move the slides around, which is why Google Slides is just great for it.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't have to have index cards.
Right. Yeah.
So I just slide everything around and go, okay, this is more of a narrative. This seems to flow better and feel more natural. Let's go for it like this. And, record it, and I do the editing, and hopefully it works out. But one of the things that we're still kind of struggling with is figuring out, and I think we figured it out because we're dealing with this right now with 2 episodes we're producing. When he's not there for an interview, and then we're doing the commentary later.
Oh yeah.
Of if he's also doing the explaining, or to approach it more of like he is the what's the word I'm looking for? Not avatar, but like the stand-in, the representative of the audience.
Gotcha.
And so the approach is, I've had a conversation with a scientist about a concept or an animal or something. And so now I'm trying to relay that information to him.
Gotcha.
And he's asking questions that the audience might have, and then I'm responding to those. So we're trying to think from the audience's perspective in doing that. And then if we're both on the interview, then it's more conversational.
Sure.
Or if it's one where it's just a more conversational interview to begin with, and it doesn't really require a lot of explanation, then I'll just do the audio, and he sometimes chimes in, sometimes doesn't.
Sure.
We're still trying to figure out that dynamic and how we want that to work, but
well, and that's
a process.
Oh yeah, absolutely, it's a process. And what I think is cool is that you can go back and I'm the same way. Like I'm really proud of. I mean, like I love all of my episodes, but like going back and listening to some of them, I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to ask a question or do this kind of conversation. Even with like I've had quite a bit of media experience, but it's such a different animal getting into this, and so just like tracking the evolution of a show is really kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah. It's and it's one of those things too, and I'm sure that you feel this of. So when you do the interview. And then you go back and you listen to the interview. And so you're listening to the whole thing. You're listening to yourself. You're listening to them. You're listening to yourself ask these questions. And sometimes you're listening multiple times. And so by the time that you're like really getting to like editing, putting things together, I mean, you might have heard it and heard yourself like 4 or 5 times.
Oh, yeah.
And it gets to a point where just like, I just don't want to hear this anymore. But you pick up on every little tiny error or issue or thing. And then so you're like, are people going to notice this? Well, they're only listening to it one time. Let's keep perspective. This is your 8th time listening. But still, and then, yeah, I get all in this like perfectionist wormhole when it comes to stuff.
It's tough. And like for my show, it's, very conversational, just like we're talking now. And so I don't do a whole lot of heavy editing, but every now and then, like I still listen to it 3 or 4 times before it goes out, and I'll hear something I said. And I'm like, I'm an idiot. Like why would I say that? Like, and so it gets in your head after a while, but I think it's a lot of fun though. Or I've had a lot of fun doing it anyway. And I've gotten to talk to you and some other really great, cool people, and it just keeps it interesting. And it's just been one of the more fun things I've had in my life, over the past few years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say that's kind of as a selfish component, I guess. That's something that I've really taken away from this whole experience. Has just been life-changing in a lot of ways, is because I'm really kind of addicted to learning.
Yeah.
Like if I was a vampire, I was immortal, maybe not even just a vampire. I think I would still be in college, and I would just be getting another degree. It's just my favorite thing to do. And doing this, I get to talk to amazing people, learn constantly, always stay up to date. And it helps me, as a high school teacher too, because then I can go back and, maybe I was thinking of approaching, a certain concept like, invasive species with one thing. And now I'm like, holy cow, I could do a whole thing about jellyfish.
Yeah.
And take that approach. My wife, on the other hand, probably doesn't appreciate when I finish up an interview and I am talking to her and I go off for 20 minutes about dung beetles. But I
do the same thing.
I think it's fun.
I do the same thing.
Yeah.
So as we kind of start to work towards the end of this a little bit, tell me about some of the nonprofit work you've started doing, because the wildlife has turned into so much more than just a blog and a podcast. You're reaching out into the community and doing all this stuff. So tell me about this thing that you've started.
Yeah. It's kind of it came from a few different things, and so like some of my work in college as an outdoor educator, and I also did some stuff where the term was at-risk youth, which is a term I have feelings about.
Sure, yeah.
Did some work with that population, and and then as an outdoor educator, there's very obvious discrepancies on who is there and who can afford it and who has access. And then, looking in science, there's very obvious discrepancies on who's there and who has access and who's excluded. And, being a college student, I remember even myself where, I would get an opportunity for an internship that could have absolutely changed my career. But the only thing offered was like, you get like $20 a week for food and that's about it. And you can put this on your resume, but you also have to pay for the credits for it to count towards graduation. And so it's like, well, hold up, I have to survive.
I have to eat. Yeah.
So what am I supposed to do? Like, that's not going to work. And so, through a lot of personal experiences and just witnessing a lot of different things, it became really abundant to me that there was a really big gap in accessibility to nature and to science. Mm-hmm. And when we started the wildlife, one of the reasons was, not everybody can make it to a state park. Not everybody can make it somewhere for an interpretive program. Not everybody can make it to a museum. Not everybody has BBC to watch nature documentaries.
Right.
So doing something that's free for people to listen to, that's easy to understand, that brings the science to them, helps them see that it's real people behind it and you can do it too.
Mm-hmm.
That was really the goal. And we were at the time calling it the nature accessibility gap, kind of like the, achievement gap. But as we've done it, we've realized that there's a lot more going on there, especially in terms of just straight up racism.
Sure.
And just like, I mean, there's no really other way to put it and no way around it. And so there's a lot of different things that kind of motivated the decision. But I'll say, I mean, my brother and I have talked about for probably 10 years, even before the wildlife, about eventually starting some kind of outdoor educational nonprofit venture to get people into the outdoors. And we just decided with, some of the things at recent events, take the thing with Christian Cooper and Amy Cooper, in Central Park in New York,
Mm-hmm.
the whole birding incident and stuff, that really just kind of motivate us to, say, you know what, I mean, why not just do it? Like, why not just, we've got a platform, we've got a podcast, we have a website, we do community events already, we lead hikes, educational programs. Let's just take it to the next step. And so, really our goal, I mean, we've started a few different things. So one fund that we are working on building up is a binoculars for young birders program.
Oh, cool.
Because binoculars are expensive, field guides are expensive. And that kind of stuff just, if you're having an interest, but you don't have access to any of that, that can really keep you out. So we're working on raising it so that people can apply and we can not only purchase them for community programs, purchase them for schools, but individuals can apply and we can get them a brand new set of binoculars and a field guide to kind of get them on their journey. We're also working on a grant program and we're going back and forth on the name here, but if you are a college student who's having to take an unpaid internship, we can help you. If you need to attend a conference, or need to present at a conference, but you have to pay to even get into it, we can help you. If there is a training, I remember being in wildlife management class and getting a sheet 3 pages long about here's all the different trainings that would be really good for you to get on your resume. And when he totaled it up, it was like thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah.
Good Lord. So, our goal is, if we can in any way interrupt the system that excludes people, we want to help. And we acknowledge that, sure, it would be easier if institutions, let's say, paid for an internship.
Yeah.
But that's a complicated route because then you look at the funding trails and things, and it's not the institution's fault necessarily. It's more, a larger societal issue in terms
absolutely.
of values and things.
Absolutely.
So acknowledging that there are other social changes that need to take place, we just want to do what we can in the role and capacity that we have to interrupt those systems of exclusion wherever and however we can. Whether it's free educational programs, funding that gets people outdoors, gets them equipment to enjoy the outdoors, to study the outdoors, to help them further their education. We just want to be a part of that.
Man, that's awesome. And that's such a great goal. And again, like we talked about a little bit that like, gosh, nature is everywhere, right? And
yeah.
But it's hard sometimes to learn to appreciate it if you don't have the opportunity to do so. So I like that
Right.
I really love that y'all are working on kind of pulling down some of those barriers. And I think we mentioned earlier that we kind of stand in the gap for our students as educators. And that comes in a lot of forms. It's from the education itself, but it's also, I think sometimes we have to bridge that gap in society where it exists.
Yeah. I mean, we're even doing things, we did hikes at parks that were farther out. And we realized, if you can't get there, what is that really doing?
Yeah.
We're literally doing things like we're doing downtown birding. So it's just you walk through downtown and we're, binoculars and we're just going to see what we can find.
Yeah.
And the plants, things popping up through the sidewalk and using iNat and, doing things that are all around us, learning to appreciate it. And, I will say, so like we put out our first episode of a mini series this last week, and that's like the first of many. So that was, that's something that's geared more towards high school and college age, but really anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But the goal is kind of like bypassing the textbook in some ways. of and how complicated that stuff can be and come across. So we're putting up educational resources, worksheets, all that stuff for free
Yeah.
with each of these episodes. Like we're only starting with phylum. Like we have a mini series on the books planned that we're working on already for mammalogy, ornithology, ichthyology. We have a general plant biology mini series.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a bunch of that kind of stuff in the works that eventually there's going to be a whole catalog of resources that, if you can't afford, the visual atlas, if you can't afford, the work textbook or something, you have a free set of resources that you can use.
That's super cool. That is super cool. I love that. I love that it's just such a great mission. And I think it's true. And this is cliche, but it's true what they say, that knowledge is power. And the way to grant or exclude power is to manage knowledge. And unfortunately, there's a lot of knowledge exclusion that has happened in our history. And I love that y'all are trying to go the other way with it and put power back in the hands of learners, regardless of their circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, there's things like, as a teacher, even, there's websites where teachers share resources, but a lot of them are like, all right, pay me $5 for this worksheet that you can download.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I understand, but oh my gosh. I mean, at the same time, like, a teacher who's looking for this kind of thing, clearly like they're needing some help to connect with their students and to find something that works. And by making it something where they have to pay and stuff, you're keeping that opportunity not away from the teacher, you're keeping that opportunity away from the kids.
Yeah.
And so that's really what it's about, for us. It's not, we don't really care about, being popular or known as individuals or anything like that. And that's just not something we care about. In fact, would be really uncomfortable with for the most part.
Yeah, right.
If we can just do something out there, not for the furtherment of the wildlife, but for the furtherment of people. That's what we're really about.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. So you've listened to the show. One of the last things I do on these episodes is ask my guests for a piece of advice. And that can be field related. That can be life related. I don't care. So if there was one thing that you wanted our listeners to take home with them today, what do you think that would be?
I'm going to say something that's somewhat general, but I feel like because it applies to a lot of different things.
Sure.
And it's somewhat something that I've been learning on a more of a personal journey. I think that the way that we look at success and the way that we look at happiness in this country in particular is something to be achieved. It's like, once I get this degree, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to have everything that I need. People will listen to me, respect my opinion. My opinion and things will somehow matter if I earn this title. I'll be happy when I finish this project. When I finish my dissertation, I'll finally be happy, and that kind of thing. And what I think a lot of people miss is that happiness and that success is not an endpoint, because whenever you reach it, you only end up kicking the ball a little further down the field.
Right.
And you say, well, now when I do this next thing, I'll be more successful and more happy, and I'll have more money and that kind of thing. It's about taking a step back, and this is just a lesson to be learned, whether you're spending time in nature or with your family or in your career. Slow down and realize that happiness and success is not a destination. It's a journey.
Yeah.
And it's a process, and it's something in the now that you get to experience. And if you look at it as something to be earned, you'll never feel it. You have to look at it as something that you already have, and you just have to look at the small stuff. Pay attention to what's around you.
That's awesome.
Just really, really be present. Focus on one of my favorite things to do in nature is pick like a 3x3 patch of grass, especially in a prairie, and just look and see what all I can find and what all is going on in this thing that I would have normally just walked right past because I'm trying to get to the end of the trail.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I'm stopping and I'm just paying attention to what's right there in front of me going on in that moment. And the stuff that you find is just amazing. The little camouflage critters you never would have seen. And I think it's a good metaphor for just life.
Yeah. Man, that's such, and I'm thinking through that as you talk about it, and gosh, that's so applicable in everything from, like you said, family life to academia and everything in between. That we miss the forest for the trees, or vice versa. Where we kind of miss out on a lot of the joy of life by always chasing that next thing.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with planning and having goals. I mean, that's all great stuff. But I think what people miss is the process that leads to that. And it's about doing the next best thing, the next best right thing, the next thing that makes you happy, the next thing that you think will work in that moment. And sometimes like that's just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Just take it slow.
Man, I love that. That's excellent advice. So, man, I really appreciate your time and you talking with me today. I really enjoyed this conversation. And
Thank you.
Again, everyone out there, you should be listening to the wildlife and supporting the wildlife and just being a part of their mission. So where do we find you? Plug all your stuff.
Yeah, so our website is thewildlife.blog, which is about to see a lot of different updates, especially related to the nonprofit stuff. We have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/thewildlife. We have a PayPal, too. It's paypal.me/thewildlife for one-time donations to help build up some of these programs that we're trying to get off the ground. As far as the podcast goes, as far as my understanding is that we are wherever podcasts can be found, wherever you get your podcast. And if you are listening and you're looking on your platform and you don't see us, let me know.
Yeah, that's important.
Because I'll get us there. Because that's important. Yeah.
Cool. Well, again, thanks so much for talking with me, and I'm looking forward to everyone hearing this sometime pretty soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
And to everyone out there, thanks for listening. As always, keep being cool, and we will talk to you next time. Y'all, my encouragement for you today is to live your life in such a way that you create access for people and not limit it. That the way that you carry yourselves and the way that you do everything in your day-to-day makes people's lives better and makes people's ability to access science and nature and just all the things that bring the flavor and joy that we have in our lives. Make those things better. Live your life in a way that makes other people's lives better. Thanks so much to Devon for coming on the show. I really thoroughly enjoyed talking with him. It was great. We may try to have him back on sometime to talk more about War of the Worlds and what it's like to be a high school teacher in this craziness that is this year. Thanks to the Texas Tech Department of Plant and Soil Science, as always, for the support and for just letting me do this craziness. I had a conversation with my department head recently, and this may get worked into my official job description. So that's kind of crazy and amazing and really cool. Thanks to everyone that listens and supports the show. If you want to be a supporter of the show, go check out patreon.com/planthropology. Just a couple of bucks, get you a sticker and some other stuff, and really just a way to keep all of the science coming. Y'all are the best. I can't wait to talk to you here in a couple of weeks. Our next episode will be on September 1st, and it will be an episode with someone about something, which is about as specific as I can get at the moment, because I'm not sure what it's going to be. But it's going to be great. I can tell you that for sure. Thank you. Y'all are cool. You're the best. And you make this worth doing. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and I'll talk to you next time.